So we have today an interesting topic. I'll say maybe it's a bit of a hard topic, but certainly an important topic, and that is halachic times. Halachic times, we are learning the halachot of davening, and one of the important halachot is from when can we daven shacharit? I got on the WhatsApp a message, a question last night. What's the earliest time we can daven shacharit? So in the summer, it doesn't. We wake up in any case after the sun rises, but it could be in the winter, more common, or if you fly, you have an airplane, it's on the plane, different times of when do we daven shacharit. So let's first define a few terms. The sunrise is the Netzachama. So Netzachama is the sunrise, probably the easiest time to explain. What's a sunrise? When you can start seeing the sun coming up above the mountains. And for that, you can have a question, like everything here and that, we have questions. Sunrise is when the sun comes above the mountains. How do you check it? Relatively to where I am or astronomically? Which means if I live we're now here at the top of the hill, right? I guess if we go down to the valley just underneath us, so there'll be a difference of maybe a few minutes even between the time we see the sun and the time that people down the valley will see the sun. So how do we calculate it? Do we calculate it according to what we see, according to the astronomic time? And the answer is both of them. For Vatikin, usually the calculation is Hanetz Hanireh, the seen sunrise. Okay, so Vatikin, many times you'll see people, if you come here early enough for the Vatikin minyan, you'll see people outside waiting to see when the sun coming out, and then they'll run in and daven. So that's Hanetz Hanireh, the seen sunrise. For many other calculations, we go more by the astronomic sunrise. That's Netz is maybe the easiest thing to define. A very easy another term is sunset, shkia. Okay, so what's a shkia? Sunset, when the sun goes down. Sunrise is when the sun starts to go up, and the sunset, shkia, is when the sun finishes going down. It's probably I think 2 minutes between when you just see the beginning of the sun and when you see the end of the sun. I think there's about 2 minutes. However, shkia is when we start to see the sun. Okay, so that shkia, zricha, sunrise is when we start seeing the sun, and shkia is when we don't see the sun anymore. Okay, no sin. We have light before sunrise and after sunset. Alot HaShachar is when it starts to be light outside. How much light? It's a question, but it starts to be light outside. How much light? Somewhere between an hour or more common 72 minutes and 90 minutes. So the common, that's called Alot HaShachar. When it starts to be a bit of light outside. About 72 minutes before sunrise. So before sunrise, the common psak, sometimes we go by 90 minutes, but the common calculation is 72 minutes before zricha, before the netz, before the sunrise. That's called Alot HaShachar. Okay, so we'll remember that time. That's Alot HaShachar. Also that we have a question. How do we calculate it? Do we calculate it 72 minutes, a fixed time, winter, summer? Do we change it? We won't go into it now. A very common calculation is just to have it a fixed time, but it's not accurate. Okay, but 72 minutes before the sunrise, before the netz, that will be Alot HaShachar. No, that's it. Yeah. Okay. Very soon we'll go according to the day. So as we said, we have the zricha, netz, sunrise. Beforehand, we have time when we still have light. The same at the end of the day, we have the sunset, and we still have time that it's considered day. Okay, or considered still like half day. Ben hashmashot, somewhere between half day until the stars go out, tzeta kochavim. How long is the between the stars go out, or between the sunset and between the time that the stars go out? Depends. Also, it's an argument. There's an opinion it's about 18 minutes, 18 and a half minutes, 24 minutes. The sunset and Set HaKochavim, when the stars come out. Set HaKochavim. So it's all between around 18 minutes or 72 minutes also. Now let's go over the one more time, and then we'll go according to the hours of the day. Okay? One more time we have is the time of Talit and Tefillin. When we say Kriyat Shema, very soon we'll be davening Mariv, and we'll be saying Kriyat Shema, we talk about seeing, or itemoto, right? Talking about seeing the tzitzit, right? So in order to, and that's when you can see things outside, there's more of a reason to be awake before electricity. So seeing is an important time. Obviously, when there's just a tiny bit of light outside, can you recognize people? No, it's just a bit of light. You need a bit more light outside in order to be able to recognize people, or in order to be recognized between different shades of the strings of the tzitzit, right? So that time is called mishiyakir. When you're able to recognize people, it's mishiyakir, and that's the earliest time for talit and tefillin. Okay, that's the earliest time for talit and tefillin. It's about 50 minutes before sunrise, before the nest. Very soon we'll do it by order. Okay, so that's a time when there's enough light to recognize people, enough light to recognize different shades in the talit, and between the tchelet and the more blue, a bit less blue, you can recognize the difference. And that's the time already when we can put talit and tefillin. Yeah, so if we go by the order, the earliest time, or the beginning of the day, is when the east starts to become a bit light, and there's a bit of light starting to appear. That's called alot hashachar. That is 72 minutes before sunrise. So that's alot hashachar. After more or less 20 minutes, we get to mishiyakir, which is the time of talit and tefillin. That's 50 minutes before sun rises. Okay, and then we have the sunrise. At the end of the day, we have the shkia, the sunset, and Set HaKochavim. Okay, so we defined 5 different terms got to do with times.
Can I ask this? Say it's fast day, you want to eat before the fast starts.
So alot hashachar. So the fast day we starts from alot hashachar. Okay, a regular fast starts from alot hashachar. Okay, so
from
oh, exactly. What can you do? We'll get there. We'll get to that very, very soon. What can you do in that time? So what can we do? Okay. Talit and tefillin, as we mentioned, we put on from the time of talit and tefillin, which is about 50 minutes before sun rises. There's a big argument when really the day begins. We'll get to it very soon. But even from alot hashachar, you can see the birds are starting to wake up, right? There's a bit of light outside. What can you do during that time? So if you really need to, you can say Kriyat Shema on that time of the morning, of the day, because it's already people are starting to wake up from alot hashachar. We're talking about 72 minutes before sunrise. So you can say Kriyat Shema. And if you really need to, if you're going out for a trip or something like that, okay, you have a flight or any other big need, you can even daven Shmoneh Esrei, during that time from alot hashachar. Okay, so if you need to, you can read. Oh, here comes the question: with tefillin or without tefillin? So, what do you think? I think sometimes here in shul, I think in the winter, they have the early minyan starts early, right? And they finish before even the time of talit and tefillin. Or the start. You wait. Okay. Let's start a bit. Okay, start a bit later. So what do you do if there's a big need? If there's a big need, you can. So for example, someone has a flight. He won't be able to daven on the flight. Okay, or I'm not sure any other. The flight is just landing. He can calculate his times until he gets off the plane, and then he'll go by customer. He won't have time to daven. He has these 20 minutes before from alot hashachar, so he can daven then. He can daven from alot hashachar. you can daven Shacharit from Alot HaShachar. The blessing on the tefillin and talit, you should say after Alot HaShachar. Okay, so the best thing is to daven on a regular time after sun rises. That's the best thing. If there's a need, we can start Shacharit from the time of talit and tefillin. Then you daven normally. You put on the talit, you put on tefillin, you say the blessing on the talit, you say the blessing on the tefillin. So if there's a need, you can start davening 50 minutes before sun rises, from the time of talit and tefillin. If there's even a bigger need, you can daven about 20 minutes earlier from the time of Alot HaShachar. But in that case, one should say the blessing of Talit and Tefillin only after comes the time of Talit and Tefillin. Okay, so the best thing is to daven Shmoneh Esrei after the Netz, after the sunrise. If you need to, you can bring it earlier to the time of Talit and Tefillin, and you can daven with Talit and with Tefillin. And if there's even a bigger need, you can daven from Alot HaShachar, but then say the blessing on Talit and Tefillin only a few minutes later when comes the time of Talit and Tefillin. Okay, so that's for the beginning of davening. That's the beginning of davening.
I visited my daughter in Detroit. That's the most western part of the Eastern time zone in the United States. Alot HaShachar is not till like 8 o'clock in the morning.
Wow. Okay.
And, so they will do what you said. They often will Talit and Tefillin and only say the brachot afterwards.
Afterwards, if there's a big need, so you can do it. Another solution will be to move Detroit to the central time zone instead of the. Yeah, so you can put on Talit and Tefillin before the time of Talit and Tefillin. The blessing say afterwards, because the mitzvah you're doing only afterwards. Okay, so you do it sometimes. You do it sometimes. It's called in Hebrew minyanei po'alim, minyanim of people who are working. They daven very early, so you can start davening from Alot HaShachar, as long as you say the bracha of Talit and Tefillin only after the time of Talit and Tefillin.
Evening, say it up until sunrise.
Right.
So then you could say Shema then, and then a few minutes later you could say Shema in the morning.
Yeah. So the time between Alot HaShachar and the Netz is like a interesting time. It's not day, it's not night. Right. So that's why we prefer to daven from the day, from when the sun rises. If there's a need, we can daven beforehand. If there's a need, sometimes a person can daven Mariv during that time, because it's still half night, as long as he doesn't daven also Shacharit and also Mariv at the same time. If it's night for you, it's night. If it's day, it's day. You can't have both of them. Okay.
You know, doing something from Alot HaShachar, what's best? Just to daven without Talit and Tefillin on?
I'll say with Talit and Tefillin. With Talit and Tefillin, yeah. Okay, with Talit and Tefillin. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, with Talit. And that's also the custom, the common custom. If people daven very, very early from Alot HaShachar, they'll put on already Talit and Tefillin, and just when it comes the time, they'll touch the Talit and Tefillin and say the blessing, and that's a common custom. Yeah, that's an example. Yeah, in the winter it'll be in the winter. It's very common in the winter. Yeah. When is the end of the time of davening? And here we come to another very big and very known argument. The way we measure times in halacha is called sha'ot zmaniyot, or relatively hours, which means you take the day, divide it to 12, and each portion is an hour. Which means in the summer you'll have long hours, and on the winter you'll have short hours. And for the night will be the opposite. In the winter you'll have longer hours, and the summer you'll have shorter hours. So the day is always 12 hours when you're talking about halachically time. The day is always 12 hours, but the length of an hour changes. Okay, so the length of the hour changes. So it's very easy to know when it's midday, right? When the sun is up above you, and that's it. How do you measure those hours? So we said from the beginning of the day to the end of the day, 12 hours. But there comes the question, when is the beginning of the day and when is the end of the day. And for that, we have a very, very big argument. A very known and big argument. If you look at the calendars, or the Halachik calendars, you'll see the time of the Gra, the time of the Magen Avraham. How does it work? Where does this argument come from? The Gra says, since the day starts from when the sun rises and the day ends at the sunset, so you measure the 12 hours from sunrise and sunset. These are the 12 hours. Okay, that's the Gra. The Magen Avraham says, 1 second, some of the mitzvot you can do already before sun rises. Right? We just said you can daven Shacharit before the sun rises, from Alot HaShachar if needed. So when should the day start? At Alot HaShachar. And when should the day end? A bit later. The day should end at Tzet HaKochavim, when the stars come out. So according to the Magen Avraham, the day starts more than an hour earlier. And according to the Gra, the day starts during the sun rises and it ends when the sun sets. The Gra and Baal Tanya, they have the same opinion. So if you look at the Halachik calendars, the Gra and Baal Tanya, that's a shita. Usually the time is a bit later. The reason is, according to the Magen Avraham, the day starts more than an hour earlier, so all the ending times will finish about an hour earlier. And according to the Gra and the Baal Tanya, the day starts more than an hour later, so that you have a bit more time to daven. If we have 4 hours to daven Shacharit, and that's the halacha, we have 4 hours to daven Shacharit, and those 4 hours, as we said, are relatively hours. So according to the Magen Avraham, those 4 hours start relatively early from Alot HaShachar, and they'll also end earlier. According to the Gra and Baal Tanya, those 4 hours start only from the sunrise, so they'll also finish a bit later. Okay, so that's a very big machloket. Here we say people say as a joke, the Gra and Baal Tanya, the Gra was a very Litvish rabbi, and Baal Tanya was a very great Hasidish rabbi. He was also a great posek, but also a great rabbi, Hasidish rabbi, the beginning of Chabad. And people say as a joke, if the Gra and Baal Tanya, both of them agree on something, obviously the halacha is like that. And the truth is, for most of the things we follow the Gra and Baal Tanya. For some things we are more machmir, like the Magen Avraham. Also, another reason, which you can, and that's an interesting thing, and here I can bring you a story. I guess you know Jerusalem. Have you ever been to the Shuk in Jerusalem? Yes, let's also share this picture here, also for the Zoom people. How do I share here? So opposite the Shuk, there's a shul called Zaorei Chama. Have you been to the shul opposite the Shuk? No? So it's worth it to go. To where it's shared also here, and the shul called Zaorei Chama. It's Zaorei Chama. You cross the road, you cross Yaffa Street, and then turn a bit to the right, and this is how the top of the building looks like. The clocks. Okay. Zaorei Chama means the shining of the sun. The shining of the sun. So it has a sundial, a sun clock on it, and it's famous for that. I think it's more than 100 years old. That building, it had a few changes. It's quite an old building. The person who built this clock, his name was Moshe. His name was, I have to check, but I think Moshe something. Don't remember the exact name. He learned how to build it by himself. He read also a book of the Gra, and also other books, astronomical books, and he built it by himself. And he built this book by himself. When the Waqf, the head of the Waqf from Har HaBayit, the Arab guy, saw this nice sundial that he built, he said, I want also the same one for Har HaBayit. So this guy goes and asks Rav Chaim Sonnenfeld, who was a rabbi in Jerusalem, then, can he go and build in Har HaBayit this sundial? And Rav Chaim Sonnenfeld tells him, look, for you it's pikuach nefesh, because if you won't do it, you might be killed. And also, obviously, he was promised a lot of money, but for you, he says, for you, it's pikuach nefesh. But the person did not want to build the sundial in Har HaBayit, so he escaped to Petach Tikva. He lived in Petach Tikva for quite a few years. He built there a few more sundials, and then just when he became older, he came to Jerusalem and returned to Jerusalem and passed away in Jerusalem. But why am I bringing this story? Because in the sundial, obviously, when does the day begin? When the sun rises. And you have only from the sunrise, from the netz, from the zricha, only then, that's when the day begins in the sundial. And when does the day end? Shkia, right? So although we have light before the sun rises, before the sun fully rises, and we still have light even after the sun goes down, the day, if in the sundial, starts only when the sun rises. And that's also exactly the opinion of the Gra. The Gra says, if you use the sundial, and that's what they use in the times of the Beit HaMikdash or the temple, so the day begins from the sunrise, it ends in the sunset, and that's the time for davening. So we can daven Shacharit for halachically hours, which are relatively hours, and then on the summer they'll be longer, on the winter they'll be shorter. And according to the Gra and the Magen Avraham and the Gra and the Baal HaTanya, these 4 hours will start at sunrise, at the netz. So if you look at the calendar and you see 2 times for the end of Shacharit or the end of Shema, you know why. The Gra and Baal HaTanya, they have the later opinion. The Magen Avraham holds it's a bit earlier because the day starts earlier, but we can be lenient and we can follow the Gra and Baal HaTanya. So lechatchila, a person should daven until 4 hours of the day, which means until a third of the day. If a person didn't daven in the first 4 hours, okay, especially if by mistake, by honest, he was busy something, he was on a plane, something he couldn't daven beforehand, can he daven later? And the answer is yes. He can daven until chatzot, until the middle of the day. Okay, so but that's not always. Only if a person he didn't do it purposely. Okay? He's in a plane. He had a reason he couldn't daven, so then he can daven until chatzot, until the middle of the day. We're talking about zman of amida, of davening. I'm not sure if we learned the times of Kriyat Shema. They are slightly different. So maybe we'll mention also the times of Kriyat Shema. Yeah. Okay, we have 2 minutes. So let's also mention the times of Kriyat Shema. Times of Kriyat Shema and similar, completely similar to the times of Amida. The times of Kriyat Shema go more by when the people should be waking up before we had electricity. So today, sometimes we wake up very early, or sometimes we wake up very late. But in even natural life, or life which is connected to nature, so you wake up, and there's somewhere there most people stopped waking up. So Kriyat Shema should be, because everyone's already awake, right? So Kriyat Shema, the time of finishing Kriyat Shema is a bit earlier. Okay? The times of, because then it's the time when people are still waking up. Okay, and the times of davening is still when it's still called a bit of the morning. Okay, so the time of Kriyat Shema is 3 hours from the beginning of the day. 3 halachically hours, relatively hours from the beginning of the day. The time of davening is 4 halachically hours from the beginning of the day. If a person didn't read Kriyat Shema, so it's psukim. He should recite Kriyat Shema, but it's not the best halach. It's not the best mitzvah he's doing. So the time of Kriyat Shema is until 3 hours from the beginning of the day. The time of davening is until 4 hours from the beginning of the day. And if a person really needs to, he can daven until 4 hours, until the middle of the day. One more halacha before we run down to Mariv. If you see the time is going by, just say Kriyat Shema. Without the blessings, just say Kriyat Shema. Okay? Because the time of Kriyat Shema is earlier. So if you see that the time of Kriyat Shema is running by, just stop, say Kriyat Shema, at least the first parasha, Shema and Behavta, better all of the 3 of them, and that's it. So that's for the times. And B'ezrat Hashem, we'll continue next week.